Bonjour tout le monde, mesdames, messieurs, chers collègues, chers étudiants. Science Week continue. La journée d'hier a été un grand succès. La journée d'aujourd'hui, mardi, ne manquera pas de l'être. J'appelle tout de suite sur scène Rachid Garraoui, qui va être le maître de cérémonie de cette matinée. Rachid est un algorithmicien d'élite, professeur à l'EPFL, ancien du Collège de France, surfeur d'élite et surtout head of the advisory board of the College of Computing. Rachid.
Okay, thank you very much, Fouad. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today and to introduce fantastic speakers who were really kind and generous enough with their time to come and talk to us, talk to you about how they managed to transform ideas, algorithms, theory into companies. Before doing so, however, let me just share with you a few some information about the College of Computing of UM6P. So this college did not exist 5 years ago. So it's a rather new college. But as I will try to argue, it's already become the best college in computing in Africa and one of the best, even if we include the south of Europe. And I will argue why in a minute. The college did not exist 5 years ago, but with the help with many colleagues, we managed to attract top-notch professors from all over the world who came to this college to teach and do research. We have around 30 professors now in the college. As you probably heard, there is a branch of the college, of course, in Ben Guerir, but there is another one in Rabat that has already started. 30 professors is not trivial to get, and we managed to attract them thanks to the president of UM6P, who has been helping a lot, and his staff, who were really very instrumental. The college gives a degree of ingénieur following the model of EPFL or ETH, Bac plus 5. And just to give you a number, today there are around 300 undergrad students. They didn't get their diploma yet. The first promotion will get it, hopefully, next year. Are there students from the first promotion who are in 4e année? Raise your hand, make some noise. They didn't wake up. Okay, I see some. Okay, I see some hate friends. You are only 30, so I think I counted maybe 25 hands. So, don't mess up. You are the first promotion. We really rely on you to behave and to really give a good impression of the college. Around 300 grad students, about 100 PhD students, and that's huge. So which means that really a very important vocation of this college is research. And I told you earlier that this college has already become the best in Africa, and the metric is very clear and precise, which is a metric used in all over the world. Where do these professors and these PhD students publish their work? And something we did not expect 5 years ago, today, in the best conferences of computer science, for example, ICLR, for those who know, or ICML, SIGMOD, VLDB, CAV, etc., you see papers coming from this college. And believe me, this is like a tennis club created 5 years ago, and now some of the players are playing and sometimes winning Roland Garros or Wimbledon. So it's just amazing. And people start talking about this college, really impressed by this achievement. Now, as the President Al-Habti said yesterday, the goal of UM6P is indeed excellence in science, and that means knowledge and publication, but not only that. It also means building, doing, creating companies, entrepreneurship. And the day of today is devoted to that, to how to go from ideas, from papers, into systems, products, companies. So the three speakers we invited this morning will hopefully illustrate that idea. No pressure, but we count on you to explain to us how we can go from an idea, from an algorithm into a company. The three of them are extremely busy, believe me. They all have ministry agendas, and they were kind enough to accept to come. And even before giving their talks, I would like to thank them. They will give each of them their talks, and then at the end, if you have questions, of course, we will invite them here, and you will ask them questions as how did you make money out of an algorithm, or how did you convince people to invest in your company, whatever you might have in mind. This afternoon, there will be something similar, but from our students who will present not the companies they created, but the companies they would like to create. And as a role model for those students, there will be Hisham Woudgheri, who is really an amazing person who created something amazing in the US, and he will start the afternoon by giving his own experience. And then the students will go through a competition about the kind of companies they would like to create. Without further ado, I will introduce the first speaker, Marc Burki. So Marc has actually studied in Morocco, in Casablanca, and his father, if my memory or if my information is correct, initiated Centrale Laitière in Morocco some time ago. So Centrale Laitière, initiated by a Swiss person, it might mean some quality. So the milk of Morocco, think of it, has been initiated by a Swiss person, and they are experts in milk. So Marc is originally Swiss-German, but he has a Moroccan, somehow some Moroccan touches in his culture, which I happen to enjoy over the years. He accepted to come, and Marc graduated from EPFL, worked with Jean-Daniel Nicou, who is a figure historique of EPFL, who created maybe the first mouse, according to some people. So he really went through the research path initially, and then created what is today, in my opinion, the biggest internet bank in the world. And it's really impressive to go from EPFL, from a lab, and a few years later, I remember seeing the company when he just created it, and now he's a star in Switzerland, and he's a role model for all Swiss entrepreneurs. Marc, thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
Ladies, gentlemen, I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you for joining me for this short presentation this morning. Bonjour à tous. I was asked to make this presentation in English, which I do with pleasure. So thank you again for being here. Thank you, Rashid, for the kind words you said about me and about my company. It's a great honor to be here, so to say. It's Morocco, and this place here has a very special place in my heart. As Rashid said, I lived in Morocco for a while. The most important part of my life, I would say, is when you go from a child to adolescent. And I was here studying at Lycée Lyoté in Casablanca from the age of 12 to the age of 19. And when I did my baccalaureate at Lycée Lyoté, and then I went back to Switzerland to study at the EPFL. So I sometimes wonder if I would be the same if I wouldn't have been in Morocco, and the answer is no. You know, there is something special about this place here. So the people, of course, the landscape, the history of this place, but there is something more. There is a little bit this spirit of entrepreneurship that you find in Morocco. You know, this ability to make things happen, to cut the corners sometimes if you have to. This resourcefulness of the people, these are all qualities that you need to have as an entrepreneur. And in Switzerland, everything is super well organized. You know, everything is going according to the books. But this is not always a quality when you have to become an entrepreneur, because you need to be flexible, you need to adapt to a situation that is changing all the time. So my mission today here is to convince the majority of you to become entrepreneurs. And the reason is because it's super fun, it's rewarding, it is what you study and what the things you will learn here at UM6P. This is what will help you becoming entrepreneurs. And I will give you a little bit my experience, and I will tell you the recipe to be successful as an entrepreneur. So sometimes people ask me, why on earth did you create a bank in Switzerland? Now it's like building a chocolate factory in the place where they do a lot of chocolate. And Switzerland is completely overbanked. You have banks all over the place. I live in a small town called Roll, and believe it or not, there are 3 banks in my town. And it's a town of 2,500 people. So people say, why do you want to create an additional bank? There are so many banks already. And the thing is, even though it's crowded and there are lots of competition, the technological disruption gives incredible opportunity. And I will try to explain what happened. Sometimes people tell me, yes, but you are so lucky because you created the bank when internet came to life. You created the bank when there was a major disruption. But there are always disruption in this world. Just think back a little bit. There have been revolution, transformational revolution, from the invention of the steam engine to the electrification to the standardization of industrial process to the invention of the internet. There always have been events in the world that are reshaping the world and gives you opportunity to be successful in what you are. So in finance, the same thing happens. The invention of the internet and now the dawn of artificial intelligence gives another opportunity for young entrepreneurs to be successful in a sector that used to be super difficult. I will tell you about all this, and I will tell you also the reason why I did it. Initially, when you create a company, you don't have a precise idea of what you want to do, which is not an issue. You know, take the biggest company in the world. They are not successful with the first idea they had. Usually they are successful with the second or with the third idea. So if you have an idea, if you create a company, if you fail, this is not an issue because you will be successful with the second or the third idea. And if I would tell you my initial business plan when I try to convince people to give me some money to create the company, sometimes I read my original business plan. I wonder why someone was crazy enough to support me with this idea. So let's dig into it. And here. And my presentation is called From Code to Capital because we are an internet bank. So it's about disruptive technologies that created one of the largest bank in Switzerland. Today we have about 100 billion assets under custody, assets under management, but it all started with a few line of code. Like every successful company, it starts in a garage, and this is actually the very first headquarters here to the left. I remember I repainted the door myself because it was so ugly. So I thought I have to do something. So I was living there almost day and night because in the beginning, you know, you are your biggest resources. If you don't commit, if you don't work hard, then of course it will not work. But here we had some wonderful time. And I even thought, actually, now that we are successful, if I should buy this small, what was a paint shop initially. And, you know, like Hewlett-Packard, they also bought the garage where they have been successful. But unfortunately, it's not for sale anymore. It has become a coffee shop now. So yeah, you can still go there and have good coffee, but I can't buy it now, unfortunately. I give you a few slides about Swissquote, so then it's done. You know, it's part of my duty. I call it the Swiss success story. What you see here is the revenues. You know, you have nice curves, and you see the profit. We just released the figures for 2024, and we did almost 350 millions of profit. And of course, it's a listed company. It's listed on the Swiss Stock Exchange. So with the profit increasing, you also have the market cap, so the value of the company that is increasing as well. Who are we? We are young, we are international, we are techies. So it's not the largest company in the world, but we have 1,500 full-time equivalent people working at the company from all over the world. Believe it or not, it's difficult to find qualified people in Switzerland because it's a small country and a very successful one, so you have to compete to find talents. So we do find talents in Switzerland, but we also hire people all over the world. So we have 58 nationalities working at Swissquote. We're very proud to be able to engage females as well. So that's a big story for Switzerland. I see here you have, in this university, you have about the same number of male and females, which is really, believe me, it's an achievement. But we try to do the same, but in our company, it's a little bit more difficult. So IT resources are still something that is very male-driven. Hopefully something about to change. And the average age at the company is very young. It's 34 years old. It's a very young and dynamic company. We are, of course, present in Switzerland, where we have the headquarters, but we are also all over the world. We do not have a subsidiary yet in Morocco, but we have one in South Africa. But why not? You know, that could be an expansion strategy for the group. Okay, now let me tell you a little bit about the digital revolution in finance. Sometimes you think finance is one of the oldest job. It's one of the oldest business in the world. There have been banks since hundreds of years. And again, how is it possible to be successful in such a conservative, in such an old business? And the business of finance has been disrupted by many technologies through the ages. It started in 1867 with something called a ticker, and a ticker is a device that will give you stock information. It's called a ticker because the sound of the machine was tick, 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 because it was creating this continuous flow of information. So people could actually take the information, and there was no need of being really present at the place where it happens. So tickers still exist today in electronic format, but this was one of the very first disruption. Then in 86, it's called the Big Bang. The stock exchanges changed and became completely electronic. You know, you may have seen old movies where people would actually be around the corbeille where they would make transactions, but now everything is electronic, and this also changed the way you interact with stock markets and with finance. In 2010, more or less, came the age of the internet bank. I'm sure you're all using applications to do your daily banking business, but that's something that is very recent. It only happens in 2010, and we are now in the age of crypto technology. You may have some Bitcoins. I hope you have one somewhere in a wallet. If you do so, then you're lucky. It's something new. It started in 2018, but it's not the end of the story. Now we are in the age of artificial intelligence. So you see, there is always a good reason to disrupt a very conservative and very existing and an existing market. And you don't have to wait for the next generation. You just have to be there because you know that the new disruptions will happen soon. So we started with internet in 1996. We created one of the very first websites at all. When we started, there was no Google, there was hardly any internet web page, and we were among the very first. I think in Switzerland we created the very first web page at all, and it was about financial information. And here you see on the page here, this is the very first web page we did. We saw this as an opportunity to transform finance, because finance was only available to an elite because you needed to have the information. If you were not present, if you didn't have the right source of information, you couldn't take any valid decision. And we democratized this, and we brought financial information to to every household. And this was obviously only possible through internet. But this was just the beginning. Then came the integration of the service. From a distribution of information, the user became part of the process. So today, and that's not only happening in finance, when you are using a service of the internet, you have been integrated to the production chain. You know, suppose you are reserving, or you are taking an airline ticket because you want to fly somewhere. So you go to the internet, you reserve the ticket, you reserve your seat, and this is part of the chain, and this is part of the process. So without knowing, you have become part of the machine. You have been integrated into the industrial process, and by doing so, you help the company saving a lot of money because you have been part of this chain of events. And this also happens in finance. You know, from a pure information portal to the clients, people started to buy products. They started to make payments. They started to manage their private finance. So integrated into the process. Now comes the age of artificial intelligence. And what will change for your daily finance using artificial intelligence? Everything will change. Notice you will have in the future, probably in your telephone, in your pocket, you will have a digital assistant that knows exactly who you are. They know what your salary is, they know your expenses, they know your financial situation. He will give you advice. He will be creative in helping you manage your daily assets. You don't need to be rich to use this type of service because finance is part of our daily life. So artificial intelligence is a major disruption in the financial world. If you are in artificial intelligence, believe me, it's the moment to enter into finance, because it will completely disrupt the big legacy banks that have not the flexibility to be successful in this new internet age. I talked to the manager of UBS, and they you know, he's the largest bank in Switzerland, and I asked him what he is doing in artificial intelligence. And he told me nothing, because he said, we are so busy with our legacy business, we don't have time to invest into new technology. And this is the chances of companies like us, because we are smaller, we are more flexible, we do have time, and we believe, in fact, that artificial intelligence will completely change the way we consume finance. So, of course, my mission today is not to convince you to create a bank. Otherwise, I would have too many competitors in the future. My mission is to convince you to invest in artificial intelligence. Because artificial intelligence will not only change you, it will change the world. It will change every company, it will change every business in this world. So you are at the forefront of this transformation. You are in an excellent university. You do understand better than everyone else the way you handle and the way you can use artificial intelligence to change the world. There are a few things, of course, that are universal. You have to focus on this transformation. You have to be flexible. You have to be useful for the community. You have to be data-driven. You have to also use these new tools with a certain degree of ethics, because that's the way how you will be successful in the future. Now, building a company is not just about doing it by yourself. If you want to become an entrepreneur, don't do it alone. I was always with my business partners. That's the guy here on the left. Me, I'm on the right. I was much younger than, I had more hair, and I was more handsome than today, apparently. That's what my wife is telling me when she sees this picture. In the middle, this is the business angel. You also need someone to give you a little bit of money. You don't need a lot, actually. He financed the company with 50,000 Swiss francs, so something affordable, so to say. He became a millionaire then because he got shares, and he kept the shares, and he passed away, unfortunately, but the kids kept the shares and are still shareholders of the company today. So you see, if you are smart, if you are intelligent, if you have a good education, if you have a good partner, a friend where you can do the startup, then that's the way forward. And this would be my conclusion for today. You are very fortunate and very lucky because you are in a place that is probably unique in the world. You are in a young university that has an entrepreneur-driven mentality, and hope you embrace this entrepreneurship. And at the end of the day, when you think you have everything that is needed to create your own company, to become an entrepreneur, you have a wonderful education, you have the liberty and the state of mind to create whatever you want to create. You will certainly find a business angel if you have a great idea to help you with the initial funding. And if you don't find it, come to see me. If you have a good idea, I would be ready and happy to finance your fantastic ideas. And then please have a lot of fun in doing so, because life is about fun. And creating a company is hard work, but above all, it's a lot of fun as well.
So thank you so much, Mark. As I said earlier, if you have questions, including questions about how the negotiation will start with Mark with your great ideas, keep them until the end. After the three speakers, we will invite them here and you will be able to ask your questions. So for those of you who come late, there were interesting, I believe, information this morning. One of them was a mathematical proof why the College of Computing of UM6P is the best in Africa. You can watch it on video by replaying. And then Marc Burki, who explained to us how from Casablanca to EPFL to sort of garage in Roll. He created a very successful company that is now making, as far as I understand, 100 billion in revenue. So this is just amazing, and I think a lesson for all of you or all of us. Without further ado, I will introduce the second speaker, Mohammed Amin Shukrullahi, who was born in Iran a few years ago, and he moved from Iran to Germany. He got his master, if my memory correct, in Karlsruhe, and then I believe a PhD in Bonn, in Germany, and then he went to the US, where he worked in Bell Labs and the University of Berkeley, created a fantastic line of, or initiated line of research on codes, all kinds of codes. Some of them are very well known, like Fountain codes and Raptor codes and others. And more recently, he created another kind of codes, which he will tell you about, leading to the creation of a company. And I think Amin is a very nice example. I always knew him as a theoretician. When he came as a professor at EPFL, he had all kinds of mathematics on his slides. And I was very surprised when he said, no, I create a company. For me, they were almost a gap to be filled, and I think he did fill it, and he will probably tell us how he managed to do that. Thanks, Amin, for being here.
Hello and good morning. Everybody hear me well? All right. I'm sorry I don't speak Arabic. I can only say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. That's I can say. And I'm not going to do any French for you, so that's English. I changed the title of my talk to Science of Startups. I'm not sure it's really true, but we'll see. Before, all right, so how does that work? Somehow, okay. So I would like to give you first a little bit of background on myself. What's my personal journey? Rashid mentioned I was born in Tehran. That's the capital of Iran. I was born there more than a few years ago. It's actually a few decades ago. That was before the Iranian Revolution. The city didn't look exactly like this, especially the tower was not there. But it's a city just to the south of the Alborz Mountains. It's about, the mountains range goes up to 4,500 meters. The city itself is at around a little under 1,000 all the way to 1,400 meters. I finished the 4th grade in an Iranian school, and starting the 5th grade, I went to the German school in Tehran, which at that time existed. It was a program for Iranian students that they would go to this school, get educated bilingually all the way to the baccalaureate, or Abitur, as they say in German. And so I went on. And then the year 1979 happened. Most of you guys probably were not born. That was the Iranian Revolution, which really changed the landscape of the Middle East. A lot of what you see today was really born then. So we had a king, the Shah of Iran. He was very good friends with the father of His Excellency, that's Sultan Hassan II. And when he left Iran, he needed someplace to stay. And he went where? To here, to Morocco. This is a picture of the Shah of Iran back then with his oldest son, who was in Morocco. Then he had to leave Morocco because of kind of the pressure of the new Iranian regime, et cetera, et cetera. So since then, I actually always wanted to come visit Morocco. And it's a really fantastic opportunity to be here, Rashid, and the College of Computing. Thank you very much again for this invitation. So what happened then? Well, so I was finishing the school in Germany, and I think this animation doesn't work, but still, it was supposed to be an animation showing a flight from Tehran to Frankfurt. So we arrived, the whole class arrived in Frankfurt, and again, this animation probably doesn't work either, or maybe it does. You saw the animation, I tell you what it was supposed to show. There's a little bit of lens that goes on my face, and then you can see how I looked back then. All right, so I went to Germany, started studying at the University of Karlsruhe, and you know, many years doing different things, and I had an academic journey. So I was a full professor of mathematics and computer science at EPFL, I think up until 2019. Now I'm an emeritus because I'm in my company. I had, as Rashid said, I was in Berkeley, I was in Bonn, I was in Karlsruhe, and then later at EPFL. And in terms of research, I've done a lot of things. Most of that was theoretical, but I always had a view towards applications. So what I really like is if you take something that just looks, feels, sounds very theoretical and make it really applied. Okay, so I sort of was involved with the company in Silicon Valley when I was living there. But then in 2009, that company was sold to Qualcomm. I had a year of what people call golden handcuffs. And after those handcuffs fell off, really 2 weeks after, I had a conversation with a postdoc of mine. And it was really a casual conversation. It was about solving a communications problem. And so he had an electrical engineering background. I didn't. I'm really a mathematician by training. And was telling me about certain things I didn't understand. And sort of one thing came to another, and the idea was born. So what's the idea? You have chips connected to one another in every electronic device you're using today, be it your phone, your laptop, the computer that is currently showing this. So these are connected using different communication wires. And as you need to send more and more and more data, the number of these wires doesn't increase. It doesn't increase. So you need to send the data faster and faster and faster. And data being sent faster means that you have a problem with the what's called signal integrity. And you need to do something about it. So what this postdoc of mine explained to me is how currently this thing is done. You send a bit over 2 wires, and you detect at the receiver whether the top wire had a larger voltage than the bottom wire, then you know this was a 1. And if you want to send a -1, it's the top wire that has a smaller voltage. It's really what it is. So you're spending 2 wires in an environment where every wire is precious. You spend 2 wires to send 1 bit, right? So I asked him, so what if you need to send 20 wires? He said, well, that's easy. You take 12 pairs of wires, and you send the bits over those. And anybody, I'm sure in this audience as well, anybody who has some experience with some type of coding knows that this is not good. You can do better. How can you do better? By letting more wires collaborate with one another. So the idea was born, and it was about pooling more than 2 wires together and doing it correctly. So the correctly part is where all the theory goes into this design. I'm not going to bore you with that, don't worry about it. But that's kind of the math that's behind it. All right, so what did we do? Very first few months, we were trying to figure this out at EPFL, and then we spun off the company. And Marc just said He looked at his first business plan and thought people were crazy to invest in it. I have the exact same impression. I would have never invested in this company, never, ever. So fortunately, I had people who believed in me and perhaps didn't know this business that well, so they invested. Okay, but you know, whatever you have, you know, most ideas that you have are not really new. So the saying, as the saying goes, there is nothing new under the sun. And the idea that I just described actually exists today in the wireless networks that you're using when you're connecting your phone or where you're even connecting to Wi-Fi. It's called MIMO, multiple antenna mobile networks. So if you look at, maybe I can see something here. When you look at the Wi-Fi base stations here, you see multiple antennas. And the theory is very similar. Having multiple antennas is like having multiple transmission wires. And the MIMO itself, it's a healthy market, very healthy market, all right? And it's growing at a CAGR of, I don't know what the percentage is. It's actually very healthy. If you look at the market for this one, it's at least an order of magnitude bigger, probably more. Especially now with AI, it's even more. So the market is there, what's called the total available market, the TAM is there. That's a good thing. And perhaps my first investors looked at that and said, you know, even if he captures 0.1% of that market, we're good. All right, so things started. We had fun times at the company. You know, coming from an academic background, you know how to write papers. You change it, you write patents. Right? It's a very similar process. Actually, it doesn't go through such a rigorous review as papers do. So, and the actual review of patents is when you get challenged in courts. Then it becomes really, really rigorous. So we had to find a cool name. And we used Kandou. This is the Farsi word for a beehive. And it also obviously means can do. So it's a good name. Didn't come from me, came from my wife, who's German, but somehow found that name. And we developed a prototype, still in an academic environment, still being sort of shielded from the realities of life. And we prepared the spinoff. The fun times continued, if this thing actually moves forward. There we go. This is the original team, the original founding team. And you can see me on the far left of this picture. And you can see I had a lot less gray hair than I have today. Now, this comes from running a company like this. And those of you who are at EPFL, you recognize the offices of the BC building.
We have John.
Okay, so this is, so here we started having different subsidiaries. This, you see here John Fox, who is opening the first chip. The first chip that we created is arriving in our British office in Northampton. He's opening it up, and you know, on the right you see the size of the company back in 2018. And, you know, a number of other things, you know, visiting companies, etc. Actually, I got CVs from a team in Northampton, where John Fox is opening that box. And really funny, I mean, they don't write their date of birth, like in the US, they don't write it. But I see as hobbies playing with my grandchildren. And I thought, really? I mean, playing with your grandchildren? But in this field, it's an asset to be experienced. In software, perhaps less so. In this field, it's an asset. So it was great to hire that team. So what is, I would consider Kandou a deep tech company. So we have a very deep technology that we want to bring to market. And so how does that work? So the way I look at this is you are going at incredible speeds towards a black hole. That's how it is, all right? And what you want to do you kind of want to slingshot around that black hole to be able to escape. Well, most companies, they go directly into the heart of the black hole. Some companies, they take it a bit slower, and they sort of go around the black hole, but eventually they fall into it. And very few companies, they kind of spin around the black hole and use it as a slingshot to excel. And you need a lot of things for that to happen. And one of them, actually a very big component, is luck. And unfortunately, you can't engineer luck. So what did we have and what didn't we have? So at the start, we had a great technology, we had great vision, and certainly we were extremely enthusiastic. What we didn't have is all the things you need to have a company. We had no focus on products. I mean, crazy, really crazy. We had no market intelligence. We had a top-down market approach. So when people ask, so what's your business plan? How much money are you going to make? Well, this is the time we get this percentage. But how? Well, you know, we'll see. And really, we didn't have a real business model. So all the things you really need for a business, we didn't have. But the things that we had on the left seemed to be sufficient to attract capital, or at least some capital. Hardware is a very, very, very expensive business. If you look at the chips, the high-speed chips in your devices, every one of them has cost the designer of that chip easily $50 to $60 million of development, easily. If you look at things like NVIDIA's GPUs, you get into easily hundreds of millions of dollars of development. It's a very expensive business. But you need to try it. So the idea was born at EPFL, and we spun it off. We used non-dilutive funds that essentially come from the Swiss government to fund the very first year. But that's not enough. You really need investors. So I'm very lucky to have, as my main investor, one of the largest VC firms in the US called Bessemer Venture Partners. And they brought in other investors, and we grew. All right, so to date, we have raised $310 million, and it's not enough. So what happens, you know, this is my very personal experience. So Mark was telling about how fun it is, and yes, there are fun elements, I would say. So if you look at this graph where the vertical axis is your enthusiasm and the horizontal axis is the time, the graph looks a bit like this, right? At the beginning, you know, it's the honeymoon. Everything is great. Everything you do is fantastic. The sun is shining on you. Inevitably, you go through a valley, and sometimes multiple times through a valley. And that's just horrible, right? You're running out of money. I remember Ed telling me once, whatever you think you need a lot more. That's a law, right? So you're running out of money, you don't know what's happening. And when you are at the beginning of this company, everything is magnified. The joy is magnified. The sorrow is magnified. There's no sort of in-between. But over the years, you know, things sort of, the modulation is a bit easier. And, you know, sometimes you have fun, sometimes you don't. This is, you know, the valley can happen multiple times, by the way, not just once. And this is the tough part. You need to somehow be able to pass through this. If there are PhD students here in the audience, I'm sure you have gone through a very similar thing in your PhD studies. It's just the normal thing, except here, you know, you're running out of job and everything else. So at some point here in this journey, I gave up my position at EPFL, which is a fantastic position to have, tenured, everything is great. And I thought I need to really concentrate on my company. Remains to be seen whether the decision was the right one. Okay. So what is the problem here? The problem is that we have a fundamental technology, and we need to map it to products and to a market. And that is hard. You will go through lots and lots and lots of failures, and you need to be very patient and somehow have a huge amount of tolerance against frustration. Now, today, we are active in many different fields. So we design chips, and those chips are manufactured in Taiwan, and we sell those chips to our customers. So today, if you have a laptop that has an AMD processor, AMD, very important, and supports the standard USB 4, which is the newest version of the USB standard, you open up that laptop, and you will find our chips inside, right behind the ports. So that's kind of like a big deal, to be able to sell to somebody like AMD, who then from there sells it to Lenovo and HP and Dell and others. Our very first design was licensed by a company called Marvell. It's not the Marvell Technologies with one L that Mark was talking about. It's Marvell with two L's. And that's a US company that wasn't actually very far from where you had your garage. We work with satellite providers, with defense companies. Our newest chip is going to be inside of AI servers by supporting PCIe. And like everybody else, we are also going towards AI. But it's not a software play for us. We provide the fundamental hardware platforms for extremely powerful and yet inexpensive AI engines. So that's what we're working on right now. So here are just some numbers. We have, at this point, this must be old because we have a lot more than 120 people. But anywhere between 120 and 180 people. We have a number of customers. We have offices in Europe, multiple, in Taiwan, in China, and in the US. And we are extremely patent heavy. We have more than 500 patents on our basic technology. Now, if you're contemplating starting a company, please read this book. It's called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. I don't agree with everything that Horowitz says, but a lot of what he says is true. It's a very interesting book to read. And there are many, many others. This is one that I personally like. So here are some of the lessons that we learned. Technology is just the starting point. You have a great technology, it doesn't mean that you will have a great company, not by a long shot. So making a real business out of the technology is quite difficult. Now, it is important, extremely important, to share your ideas. I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs who are sort of shielding themselves from their environment, saying, oh, people will steal it, what do I do? It doesn't happen. If by just mentioning your idea, somebody can steal it, then maybe the idea has a problem. Right? You need a network. You need to talk to a lot of people. You need to understand where you're going. So that's another important thing. The other thing, the third one, perhaps is the most important one, is you need to establish a culture for your company. It's extremely important because as you go through changes, and you will always go through changes, it's the culture that takes you back to who you really are. Now, I just took 3 lessons. There are a lot more than that, but these are some of the sort of things that I learned. So the question is, where is Kandou? So we're still spinning around the unknown. So we haven't really taken off. So it's still a lot of work ahead of us. But we have a very good team, and people are very committed. This is at least the culture I built in my company. Unfortunately or fortunately, it's a culture of work. People told me, you don't do anything outside of work, taking people out to anything. That's just not me. I don't do it. And people somehow have gotten used to it. So they work extremely long hours without, a lot of fun, at least during the working time. So it takes a lot of effort to get to where you want to be. But it can be fun at many, many times. And if you show perseverance, learn from mistakes, and move quickly, then I think you will be successful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mohammed Amin. For those who are coming just now or came late, again, a brief summary of what happened. We had Mark Burki, who presented to us his story, or the story of Swissquote, and then Amin Shukrullahi, the story of Kandou. If you have questions, please keep them until after the last talk, and we will invite the speakers here, and you will be able to interact with them. So please think about the kinds of questions you want to ask. Now, the third and last but not least speaker, I'm extremely happy that he accepted to come also, because, as I said, they're all extremely busy. Edouard Bugnon is a very, very interesting researcher and entrepreneur. Who has heard about VMware? Please raise your hand. Okay, so many people did. So I believe, and then Edouard will correct me, Edouard was a student at Stanford University and was one of the founders of VMware with his advisor back then. He was the first chief architect of VMware in the US. And then later on, he created another company. I don't write notes. I think it's called Nueva or Nuova or something like that, which was acquired by Cisco. And he became vice president of Cisco. So the first chief architect of VMware and then a vice president of Cisco. Eventually, he came as a professor at EPFL, and he became vice president of EPFL. So he didn't acquire EPFL yet, but maybe that will happen very soon. He's also a business angel, so I'm sure if you have great ideas, he might be able to sponsor or help sponsor some of your ideas. Thanks so much, Ed, for taking the time to come here.
Thank you very much, Rashid. Mark, Amin, and I are trying not to be redundant, and so we each try to have a different perspective and share our respective perspectives on our journeys with a different style. But I do want to say, be redundant in one area, which is the most important one, which is to express our gratitude for the invitation, but also share how impressed we are by what we are seeing here at UM6P in terms of the growth of this place, the College of Computing. It is something that is unprecedented in Africa, but also extremely rare around the world. We all appreciate how hard it is to start something from new. It's not just about the resources, it's not just about the infrastructure, it's also the vision about how to put together the people so that you end up having an effective organization. So there's a few things in common among the 3 speakers today. All 3 of us live in Switzerland. We all use computing and software as our way to express science and technology-based innovation. There are, of course, different ways to do that. All three of us happen to be using software or hardware or algorithms in order to do our work. And then, of course, the third aspect that has us in common is we're all three of us are good friends of Rashid, so thank you very much, Rashid, for this organization. So the title of my talk is called Perspectives on Scaling, and it's in the context of what is my main contribution, scientific contribution, which is in the space of virtual machines. So if you don't know what a virtual machine is today, that's perhaps okay because the term got subsumed by a bigger term which is called the cloud. And now, of course, if we look at our digital lives, there is a visible portion of the iceberg, which is the phones we have in our pockets. And there is the invisible portion of our digital lives, which is called the cloud, or cloud computing. And cloud computing is largely based on virtual machines. So a few words about me, and I'll follow up with what Rashid has said. I was born and raised in Switzerland. Then I grew restless, and I had the opportunity to move to the United States. And in fact, I lived in the great state of California for 18 years. I started my PhD at Stanford, and then about 3 years into the PhD, I was, reasonably close to finishing, but still had a long way to go. I stopped my studies, and I took a risk, which is to leave Stanford without my PhD and start a company. And that first company was VMware. And I'll explain what VMware was about in a minute. And then, as was said, I started my second company, which was purchased by Cisco. And after these 18 wonderful years in the United States, it was time to come back home. And I think it's important for those of you who are thinking about going abroad to, if you're going to go abroad, learn a lot while you're abroad, and then you will appreciate your country even more when you come back. So for the last 13 years, I've been a professor at EPFL, at the head of the Data Center Systems Laboratory, and also have another set of functions. In particular, I'm the Vice President for Innovation and Impact, which is a new position. And then I have 3 other positions as independent director, so outside of my job at EPFL. Logitech is a company that is a Swiss company. Many of you probably have a Logitech mouse or a Logitech keyboard or a Logitech camera. I'm on the board. I'm on the board of a very important institution in Switzerland which does innovation promotion. It's called InnoSwiss. I was on the board for 8 years, and I'm on the board of the Red Cross. So this is the story about the scaling of virtualization and scaling in general. So what was virtualization at the beginning? And for this, I have to go back to the late 1990s. And at the time, the computing world was built around a duopoly. Intel had the monopoly for chips, and Microsoft had a monopoly for operating systems. So if you want to buy a desktop or a laptop or a server, they all came with Intel chips and Microsoft operating system. And that duopoly was extremely effective in creating the computing industry, democratizing computing. It was the early days of the internet. Now, we had done some work around a sort of an academic technology at Stanford called virtualization. Not on x86, not considering Windows. But then we asked ourselves, what if we could actually insert a piece of software between the 2 layers of that duopoly? So basically, Intel and Microsoft, create this massive value because they control uniquely their interfaces to each other. And of course, it's pretty ambitious to say, well, what if we insert ourselves between the 2? Of course, neither Intel nor Microsoft would necessarily like it. Why would you do that? Well, if you insert yourself between the 2, you can run multiple copies of an operating system, perhaps a Microsoft operating system, perhaps a non-Microsoft operating system, on top of the same single computer. And this is what is called a virtual machine. Rather than operating on a physical machine, you operate on a virtual machine, and the virtual machine runs on top of or using this additional piece of software called a virtual machine monitor or a hypervisor, depending on the terminology, which today is the foundation for all cloud computing. So this was the vision behind VMware. And then I'll go back to it in terms of what it means in numbers. It's a very simple vision to say, well, we have established players, massive players, but then as a startup with no resources, just a few people decide to work on something together, we're going to see if we can sort of insert ourselves at the pain point, the customer pain point. And the way to start the company was we decided to sort of start with sort of something that was achievable, which is to deploy this technology on desktops because, you know, IT people wanted to run multiple computers at the same time, and it was complicated at the time. And so with virtual machines, it was a lot easier. And then we moved into the server market, which is where the money is, which is where the cloud is today. So I was at VMware for 8 years. I'll go back to the specific numbers. And then I left VMware, and then I was an entrepreneur in residence at a big venture capital firm in Silicon Valley. And this is where I met the people who became my co-founders at Nuova System. And they basically came to me asking about virtualization. It was relatively new at the time. And Mario Mazzola, who is the CEO of Nuova Systems, basically had this vision, it was his vision, that virtualization was going to change the way we think about data centers and the way we build data centers. He goes, I know this will happen, I just don't know anything about virtualization. And so I was brought in as the virtualization expert with the notion of building not a new virtual machine solution, but the hardware for virtual machines. And one of the corollaries of that vision was the need to sort of unify what were at the time disjoint networking fabrics running inside data centers, and also to unify the management of these fabrics. And of course, I know at the time I knew nothing about data center fabrics or networking technologies. I knew nothing about data center management. I knew a little bit about I/O, because I/O is something that you do and you deal with a virtual machine. But nevertheless, we ended up building a team. I was the CTO of that company as well. And that team ended up building multiple chips, putting these chips together as systems and computers. And Cisco ended up marketing these solutions as UCS. And today it's roughly 10% of Cisco's business is sort of derived from the technologies that we built at Nuova System. So if we put this in perspective and in numbers, for VMware, I have 3 columns. This is the year we started, the year I left, and then today or last year. We started as a group of 5, and I think there are different types of companies. There are companies that have a single founder, and there are companies that have multiple founders. And my only experience are in companies with multiple founders. So I'm not saying it's the only model, but if you're going to have co-founders, they better be really good co-founders. And so finding the right co-founding team is extremely important. Of course, when you start, you have no revenues. You need a little bit of investment. The first round was small, but by the end of the first year, we had raised $2 million investment. I left VMware in 2005. At the time, there were 700 employees. So you can imagine what this means to go in 8 years from 5 to 700. We had $200 million in revenue. We had raised $22 million along the way. And the company had been purchased by EMC the year before. And then VMware grew after I left. Of course, I get no credit for this. It was purchased last year by Broadcom for $69 billion. So it was the largest technology M&A acquisition transaction of 2024 was the purchase of VMware by Broadcom with approximately 25,000 employees. So this is sort of how VMware scaled. And this is how Nuova scaled. So again, a founding team with 6 people, but different. right? So VMware, we had no experience. I was a graduate student. I had no connections. My advisor was a co-founder. Our CEO had some experience in starting a company before, but we were relatively under-equipped. Nuova was different. We knew what we were doing. We knew it was going to be complicated. We found 10 million from the beginning, and we very quickly got an investment from Cisco. I left Cisco in 2011. The unit at the time had over 1,000 employees with 400 million revenue for a total overall investment prior to the acquisition of 70 million. And today it's a significant fraction of, as I said, of Cisco's business. So I learned a few things along the years. I actually also taught entrepreneurship for 5 years at EPFL. And when you teach entrepreneurship, you have to go through and explain all the terms. And these are things that, for some of you who've taken entrepreneurship class, you also probably know these terms. But what I enjoy the most is basically sharing the wisdoms of the lessons that I learned. And so there are a few of these very simple things, and they're not from me, they're all from people that I work with. The first one, and Amin said it as well, I think using nearly the same terms, is you need a lot of humility when you create a company, because even if you have a technology-based and science-based startup, the technology is only a necessary but not a sufficient condition for success. And Mario Mazzola, my boss at Nuova, was very clear about this, right? Yes, we need to have the technology. It's got to work. That's the prerequisite. By no means is that sufficient. The second thing, and Amin basically mentioned the struggles of being only tech science focused and not thinking about the market. There is one fundamental term that we always teach in entrepreneurship, which is the notion of the product market fit. You need to have a product that fits the market. And the way you establish and prove that you have a product market fit is by expressing the value proposition of your product, not of the technology, but of the product. And my friend Junia, who's just a friend of mine, I've never worked with him, has the best way of summarizing what actually constitutes a good value proposition. It has to be relevant, simple to communicate, and defensible. And if you're ever thinking about coming up with a business plan or a business idea as an entrepreneur, right, there will always be a slide with value proposition, because every slide deck from the Y Combinator has a slide that is called the value proposition. If your own value proposition is not relevant from a business perspective, simple to communicate, and defensible meaning you have a right to win with that value proposition, then you probably don't have something that is sufficiently strong to be successful. There's always a risk after having worked extremely hard on something to say, well, I've worked extremely hard on something, I have to continue along that path. And instead, you should actually always have the flexibility to pivot to new ideas. So Diane from VMware always said, you always have to look forward, never look back about what we did in the past. That doesn't really matter too much. We learned a lot, but now we have to look forward. This is axiomatic, right? Time is money and money is oxygen if you're in a startup. That is something that actually typically is oversold, right? It's of course fundamental, but that's not very helpful. The more helpful one is unfortunately a contradiction. And the contradiction to the previous slide is, and this is also from Mario, is that timing is everything, and products often fail because they're too early. So you have to go very, very fast because time is money and money is oxygen. And of course, if you're behind the market, then you will fail. But the reality is most of the failures in startups are not because the technology is too late, but it's because it's too early and the market is not ready. So timing and getting things right is extremely important. If you sell to customers, first of all, you need to have an intuition for what customers need, and I have none of that. So I'm not going to say anything about what it means to sell to end users. I can only share my intuition about what it means to sell to large companies. And as a startup, you can actually sell to large companies. It's perfectly a fine model, the B2B business. What's important about this to recognize is that you need to have a set of features. And these features are important because this is how you start conversation with customers. But in fact, this is not what customers need. At the end of the day, enterprise customers need to have a solution that meets their needs, and their needs could be extremely obscure. And at VMware, we realized at one point that they were super excited about our leading features, the ones that we talked about. But then we realized there was this whole set of things that were incredibly uninteresting and boring integration requirements that were prerequisite to deployment, and then we actually had to prioritize. And we call this enterprise readiness, right? So you need to make sure that your products are ready for your customers, and if your customer is an enterprise, they get to dictate, even when these requirements don't make a lot of sense, what these requirements are. The world is not flat. In fact, the business world has centers of gravity. Here you have in Morocco, it's the center of the universe in a particular form of mineral mining for agriculture, right? As we all know, right? And so the asymmetry of the world is important, and every business has a center of gravity. And what's important when you start a company is to know where the center of gravity of that world is. I know Amin goes to Silicon Valley a lot because that is one of the centers of gravities of his world. Your business, your idea may have a different center of gravity, but knowing where the center of gravity is fundamental. Having said that, thinking globally, knowing where the center of gravity is only one, it's not, again, an actionable insight. The actionable insight is to combine the global thinking with the local behavior. Leverage your local resources. Know the strengths that are available where they are available. Go to random places in England because this is where you might have talent if you want to build the company that Amin is building. So acting locally and finding the places where you can benefit from local resources is extremely important in this global world. And then, and I didn't realize Amin was going to say that, but yes, it is going to be more expensive than you think. Right? So funding companies and funding growth, and again, my experience are two companies that went through massive growth does require funding. It's counterintuitive, but the faster you grow, the more resources and the more funding that you typically need. So some of you might be thinking about building a company at some point after your graduation. Get your degree. Don't do like me. Get your degree. It took me 18 years to get my PhD, and I hold the record, and I don't want the record to be beaten. But if you're thinking about building a company, you have to ask yourself a few basic questions. And the first one is to actually really have this notion of, okay, if I'm going to do something, what is the center of gravity of your world? So when I give this speech in Switzerland, I always give the example of mechanical watches. If you want to do something that is a breakthrough invention in the field of mechanical watches, well, the good news is the center of gravity is next door, because Switzerland is the only country that really builds mechanical watches. They're not particularly useful, but they're elegant, and they seem to have a market. Now, in your enterprise, in your idea, I always think about where the center of gravity will be. Ask yourself how much it's going to cost. Even though it's going to be more than you think, you have to at least have an answer to how much it's going to cost. This is where multi-stage financing comes in, and this is why it's a fundamental tool. And mastering and understanding and appreciating why multi-stage financing exists and why it's an effective way of creating companies is fundamental. And then the last one, this was mentioned by I think all the speakers, is it's a lot of fun. I would do it again, but you need to be committed. You cannot be an entrepreneur and have 18 other side interests and activities. It requires a very significant amount of commitment. In my case, I suspended my PhD to start a company because I was committed to that company. And it requires that level of commitment in order to be successful, and I hope many of you will be successful. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Edward. I'm calling the three speakers to sit. I was asked to ask you to take those in the center, whatever that means. So thank you very much. Again, some of you came late, significantly late. I have names. I'm talking about the students, not about you, Muna. So for those who came late, please, you can check the videos. I think they are accessible through YouTube. I believe you should look at them, seeing how students like you eventually became founders of companies, presidents, CTOs, etc. is very interesting, and I think it's good to watch these things. And again, before starting the question session, please join me and thank these speakers who came all the way to take the time to tell us their stories. Est-ce qu'il y a un microphone dans la salle pour les questions? Il y a un microphone. Questions. There are questions in the back. I already see that. All the way in the back. You can ask your questions, I guess, in English or French. I mean, French is fine.
Hello. I just have this question. Basically, if I have some kind of abstract idea, let's say an algorithm or a concept, how can I sell it? How can I build a business model around it and sell it to the customers?
Okay, you know, I'm the professor, so I'll take the. It's a great question that I've gotten from every student. So you have to, my recommendation is you have to narrow it down to something that is a 2 or 3 minute explanation at most. Excuse me. And it goes. Actually, Mark.
So I think you have to, first you have to find the purpose of your idea. You know, what's the end products that you will sell to potential clients. Now, it's not just about the code, it's also about the product. So once you define the products and once you define the solution you want to solve with your product, then you have to find the initial circle of people who believe in your project. And I think it's easier than we think, because good projects do attract good people. You know, you start small, you enlarge your initial circle, and then from contact to contact, you will find the way to commercialize and to sell your products. I wouldn't be worried too much about that. You know, it's always the question: how do I go from my initial idea to a successfully commercial, viable product? It's easier than you think it is.
Amin, you want to add something?
It's interesting because I would have said the exact opposite. I think my experience, especially for ideas that are coming out of academia, the most important position you want to have in your company is the product person, unless you're yourself a good product person. That's a product person, sometimes called a product manager, is the person who finds the fit between the technology and the market through the right product. Now, as Mark said, you have to talk to a lot of people. Maybe you get the idea. You have to be thinking, you have to learn how to think like your customers. What is it that they need? You have to translate it into the need of that customer. But it's not easy, so that's my experience.
And so first of all, thank you for stepping in, and I apologize for the fact I had to be interrupted. So I agree. In fact, I don't think there are too many contradictions. It's a function of the space that you're in. Some technology is relatively shallow, and some technologies are incredibly deep. So I'll give one example, right, of something that is deep. Let's say you're a medical doctor or a bioengineer, and you identify a new drug that is going to cure cancer or some type of cancer with 100% probability. Well, then everything else is easy, right? But finding that miracle drug, of course, is incredibly hard. Now, a lot of the startups that you will hear about, that you read about in the news, everything that revolves around Y Combinator in San Francisco, for example, is at the other opposite end of the spectrum, right? Building an Android application is trivial. Every one of you knows how to build one of those, right? Coding an app with a backend is not the problem. Finding the fit between the product and the market is where the challenge is. And so this is why you need to iterate. And I go back to my slide about this value proposition. You need to articulate the value proposition of your product. And if your value proposition is not relevant from a business perspective, easy to explain and defensible over the long run, then it's very difficult to build a venture around it. And finding that ideal product market fit should be the focus of your work in the early days.
And if I can add something, goes back to what I said. You know, you're not always successful with the very first idea, the very first product you have. So in the beginning, what you're selling is you're selling yourself to a potential investor, because he will look at you, he will look at your education, he will look at your commitment. And also this is why it's so important, you know, don't make the mistake of stopping your academic career, you know, go to the end. Have a degree that has a value, you know, it's a solid piece of paper, because in the very beginning, when you see an investor, the first thing he will look at you. You know, who is the person I have in front of me? You know, how strong is he? What's his academic career? Because that's what you're investing in as the business angel.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Questions from the room? I see hands raised in the fifth.
So, hello everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the UM6P for this incredible opportunity to engage with experts in finance and technology. But before, I want to add just a point about the question asked before. I think that the necessary point is to have a human-centric design approach, to have the necessary empathy to understand your customers, and after find the right problem to detect the right solution after. We have many technological solutions in the market, but without customers. So the first thing is to detect what the need of your customers so you can have a good solution in the market. So my name is Bel'Allam Yahya, a first-year PhD student in fintechs at the Hassan II University, and a graduate of the Euromed Polytechnic School with a background in entrepreneurial support and technological management. So my research focuses on exploring an incubation model based on regulatory sandboxes for Moroccan fintechs, aiming to analyze how a flexible regulatory framework can foster innovation and competitiveness in this rapidly evolving sector. So I would like to ask Mr. Mark Barker a question that would provide valuable insights. So entrepreneurial support goes beyond funding and infrastructure. We have mentorship, strategic guidance, and regulatory clarity are equally crucial. But based on your experience, what key elements should an effective support system provide to fintech startups to help them scale sustainably and also navigating the regulatory challenges? And thank you so much.
Okay, that's a great question. Yes, when you do financial service, unfortunately, you don't do it by yourself. You know, you have a body which is a regulator, and they make sure that what you're doing, you know, is compliant with the law. So, in the beginning, this is a hurdle because you cannot just develop freely your financial services to the clients, which makes a lot of sense, right? Because the regulator is here to make sure that if someone is giving you money for your financial services, then it's protected by a certain number of rules in the regulation. Now, this has the unfortunate disadvantage of making the life of fintech startups really difficult, because you also need to have equity, you need to have capital. In Switzerland, for instance, if you want to be a bank, you need at least to have 10 million Swiss francs. So because fintech is so important and fintech is changing the way we are consuming financial services, most of the regulator created what they call sandbox. So these are lighter regulation that will help you jumpstart your company. So I don't know exactly what the situation is in Morocco here. I also guess that there are sandboxes available, and this helps you create or grow the company as you develop your ideas. The good news, in a way, is that you don't need to do everything by yourself in the beginning. You know, you can team up with another bank, for instance. They would be more than happy to help you develop this, because they see opportunities for themselves. Maybe secretly they hope that if you have really a good idea, that they can buy you out after a certain moment when you are successful. So my advice to you would be to, instead of just, you know, trying to do everything by yourself, go to see a bank or go to see a financial institution with your idea, explain them what you are doing, make sure that they respect your independence in a way, but use their existing license to hook up with your own idea.
Thank you very much. More questions? Unfortunately, I don't see the room very well. There is somebody in, so please ask short questions so that we have time to take a lot of questions. Thank you.
4 very short questions to each one of you. Rashid, I think you're missing one indicator of success to compare different universities. Potentially, the outcome for among the diplomas, the ones who went out, how many have launched a unicorn or have had a successful example that you could share that will be the bankable output, quote unquote. So question for you, Rashid. For you, Mark, would you have an AI use case that would protect your internet bank from the revenge from large banks that are very much into the AI, I guess? Question for you, Amin. How do you do the balance currently between your business and your academic role within UM6P and most likely in other places simultaneously, while keeping your dedication to behind, if you still have interest and involvement? And last but not least, very simple question and short for you, Edward. Who is Mario?
I will answer last. Please go ahead.
Okay, it's a great question, because as long as I remember, the investors told me, you know, you're in a sweet spot because you're using a new technology, but the empire will fight back. You know, you will be crushed by the big guys because they are so more powerful than you are. They have infinite means. You know, they tell me, how can you survive against a big bank suddenly enter into your field of expertise? And usually what I tell them is, say, yes, but while they are trying to fight back, I will already do the next step. You know, so if you're small, the advantage is you're agile. You can react much faster. And these big companies, even though they are powerful and they have means, they are lazy and they are full of internal politics. You know, that's the big advantage. You know, I did many projects for big banks in my previous life when I was a consultant, trying to find enough cash to finance my company. So unfortunately, I could not commit all my time to my company. I also had to make sure that cash is coming in. So I was doing consultancy for big banks. And the amount of politics in these companies are just crazy. You know, you start with having a meeting with one person. At the end of the week, you have 50 people joining you in the meeting. So it's totally inefficient, and that's our big advantage. We are small, we are efficient, we don't fear actually the power of larger corporations. This is why disruptions exist. Suddenly, small companies are able with a little amount of money to challenge the big guys. Look what happened in China with DeepSeek. No, they were able in artificial intelligence to challenge companies that have invested 100, 200 billion with probably about the same outcome. So it's possible.
Actually, DeepSeek shorted NVIDIA before they, you know that, right?
To make some cash.
This is a hedge fund. They shorted NVIDIA.
Oh,
this is why they actually gave the model away.
Oh, that's great.
Made a lot of money. So to your question, how do I keep balance? I don't have a balance. I have no balance. Work-life balance doesn't exist. The life part doesn't exist. And I don't do, I'm a professor emeritus at this point, so I'm not teaching. But I do satisfy my research curiosity inside the company. So a lot of research that I try to be involved with if I can. That's how I survive. There is no other way. Sorry.
So the simple question, who is Mario? So his name is Mario Mazzola. You can look up his biography, probably on Wikipedia. At one point, he was responsible for 45,000 engineers at Cisco. And then he left Cisco, came back. So he's a legend of the networking industry. Now, what's interesting about him is he is a classically trained Italian. He studied philosophy and Greek. And he used his background in philosophy as a manager. So he was my boss for many years. And all of our conversations were walking around the parking lot in Silicon Valley and talking. He managed by walking around and having conversation with people. There was never an exchange of numbers. There was not a PowerPoint management style. It was really about the essence, which is why some of my most interesting quotes are from him 20 years later. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. There was a question to me about ranking colleges. It was not a joke, but almost a joke. I said earlier this morning, the College of Computing, although it just started 5 years ago, is the best in Africa. And I gave a metric, and the metric is the only metric we have today, and it advantages us. And the metric is the papers published in the best conference in computer science and electrical engineering. And from that metric, the college is the best. But you're absolutely right. A very important metric is what would the student do when they graduate? Will they create companies? The only problem is that no student has graduated yet. So that metric for now will not apply, but hopefully starting next year, the first generation will go out and we will pressure them a little bit to become very rich so that they create unicorn. I received a question on WhatsApp for Amin. And the question is somebody I know who sent me a comment saying, I'm watching the talks on video because the talks are streamed. The talks are amazing. And the question for Amin, did it disadvantage you to be named Muhammad Amin when you go ask for money in the Silicon Valley or in Germany or in Switzerland?
The answer is a resounding yes.
But you managed.
I managed because I'm working with people who look beyond that, and it is. I mean, this is a problem. For me, it's always a problem going to the U.S. That's what it is. So, yeah, it's a problem.
So I think the lesson to be learned here is it is a problem, but still, Muhammad Amin is very successful and his company is very successful. So those kinds of problems can be somehow circumvented to some extent.
Yeah, you shouldn't, sorry if I may say, you shouldn't be bothered by it. I mean, stupid people exist everywhere. Don't be bothered by them.
Thank you.
Doesn't matter.
So I hope the person who asked the question is still watching to get the answer. Other questions in the room? We still have a few minutes. You might have noticed how punctual our guests are. We started in time, the talks were in time, and this is something, please try to also learn from it. And Switzerland is an amazing country for that. There is a question here in the first.
Hello.
Okay.
Hello. This one.
Yes, please.
If I can. So we are hearing a lot about agentic AI and what they are doing in interacting with the environment and doing tasks. My question is very short. What is your advice to this new generation of engineers in their choice of career to not be rapidly disrupted by this kind of agents? Thank you.
So before you answer, Edward, the person who asked you a question is the head of Capgemini in the Middle East and is member of the Industrial Advisory Board of this famous College of Computing.
Alors, enchanté, merci pour la question. So, first of all, every one of you in the room should try to understand how AI operates. And AI, of course, is an umbrella term. Within this umbrella term, there are very different methods and technologies that are used. And I think it's very important if you have an engineering background today and you're studying a field of engineering is to understand at the appropriate level of depth how these technologies work. Because it's very important as engineers to, the way I describe it is there's always this frontier between engineering, which is what we understand, and black magic, which is things we simply don't. Now, there are many things that I don't understand at all, and I'm comfortable with that, but there are things that I believe I should understand, and I think for you, for the younger generation, it's extremely important to understand scientifically, mathematically what AI is, why it works when it works, and why also it doesn't work when it doesn't work, right? Because this nuance and where things actually work and don't work is important. I think from an education perspective, AI has to be part of the curriculum. It's a tool. I used to teach 2 classes, one in the fall, one in the spring. The one in the fall, the rule is you're not allowed to use Copilot. You have to basically write the software yourself because we try to teach low-level software to students. And then the other class, which is for the same students 1 semester later, it's the opposite. They have to build an Android app, and we say you can use any resource you want, right? But you have to basically master. So I think this duality, there's no contradiction. Sometimes you want to really go to in-depth by yourself, and sometimes you want to use the state-of-the-art tools that are available because they're fundamental for productivity. Now, from a business perspective, the productivity benefits of AI vary from the area from space to space. And the best taxonomy I've heard is to sort of split the impact of AI into 3 categories. One is on general productivity, and this is where all of the agentic AI comes in, right? Anything that involves back office, technical support, customer support, claims processing, expense reports, all these things, human resources, are being effectively automated by agentic methods. Sometimes in a very disruptive way. It's a matter of efficiency. So the notion that resumes get screened by tools is something that is now considered ethically acceptable. And I think we should probably ask ourselves whether it's really the case, should be the case or not. The second category is in the core business planning and management for large companies. We have a methodology to run companies using these pieces of software called ERPs. And if students, you don't know what an ERP is, that's because you are fortunate enough not to know what an ERP is. Eventually you will. So ERPs are these enterprise resource planning software which aggregate and force business to work in a particular way. And AI is potentially going to transform businesses that can sort of turn their data from being ERP managed to being effectively managed in a way or expressed in a way that could be consumed by AI tools. And there are significant productivity benefits to the companies who can make that transformation. This requires the core digital transformation of the company. And then the third aspect of AI, completely different, which is it going to revolutionize the core business, right? Will AI be used to discover new materials, new compounds, new proteins, new things, new mechanical structures that engineers and scientists would never identify themselves, but AI can, and that's a whole different story. Sorry for the long answer.
Thank you very much. Mark, you want to add something, or Amin?
Yes, I think everyone in this room here has one big advantage on with the commande mortelle. You know, you have the tools and the intellect and the ability to understand what is behind AI. I sometimes meet people, they tell me, you know what, I'm an AI specialist. I say, oh really? I say, yeah, I'm using ChatGPT, but that doesn't make you a specialist. You know, you have this advantage, this ability to go beyond, you know, to see what's actually behind. And this is an advantage because you will be able to use this technology and this tool in a completely different way.
Well, I have a view on AI. That's kind of my personal view. The events around AI are just staggering. And I was just amazed to hear J.D. Vance, Vice President of the US, talking about that in a way he did in Munich. Because, frankly, we don't know where it is going. There will be a market correction. People are already looking at Copilot, for example. Copilot, with its might, its whole ChatGPT behind it, has only increased a little. The value that Microsoft or Azure has created is just very little. So investors are wary. They're saying, well, we're going to put all this money in there. Is it going to give us anything? And then you have something like DeepSeek, which is really not a big deal. I mean, DeepSeek created this whole thing. It's really not a big deal. This is the way things will be done in the future. And then all of a sudden, markets are out of whack. Just because you know, somebody figured out something that's actually quite easy to figure out. And you ask yourself, why didn't somebody else do that before that? So we're still in an environment where things are rapidly changing. I'm 100% sure there will be a market correction. When it's going to come, I don't know. Maybe, you know, unfortunately for my company, it may come before our products are on the market. We don't know that. But we still don't know exactly which direction that will take. So it's good to work with it. It's good to use it if you can use it. But keep in mind that this is version 0.1. And, you know, we're looking down to version 5.0 where things are really happening.
Merci. I see some questions, many hands raised. Please ask short questions so that we can take all of them,
Thank
hopefully.
Quickly, do you have any tips or advice for big companies to keep the agility? So basically how a company can scale up and keep in this agility that you mentioned. Thank you.
Yeah, well, yes, they can change. You know, they can create the environment, the infrastructure to do so. You know, they also can create smaller teams within bigger teams, and they can do it what many US companies are doing. You know, they create an ecosystem of startups around them. That's the most efficient way. And many great ideas in larger corporations have emerged through small startups that they hooked very closely to their larger company.
I don't, yes, it is probably correct. I don't have that experience. I can only see the big companies that we work with, and most of these companies, they have cash cows. And those cash cows are like the cows in India, holy, you don't touch them. As you grow the company, for better or for worse, there is politics that enters. Lots of voices and so on. So there is something that happens when you grow. And I think if you can manage it as you're growing it, that would be fantastic. If you wake up to a large company and the culture was not there, then it will be very, very, very difficult. Also, I would like to add to what Marc said. You know, if companies had just teams standing around doing new things and, you know, sitting on their hands, those companies will have an issue, obviously, financially. So by the time, you know, they have assembled the team, put things together, it always takes some time. I know some companies that are not like that. I'm not going to mention their names. But I also know some large companies who were squarely like that, and some of them are going out of business now after many decades. And you can imagine it has a few letters in their names.
Merci. More questions?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Burki, Dr. Shukrallahi, and might as well Dr. Bunyan, even though you didn't complete your PhD.
No, he did. He came back and finished after.
Oh, that's great to know. Yeah. Then I resume. Dr. Bunyan, for sharing your remarkable experiences. Each of you has successfully introduced groundbreaking technologies, be it AI in finance, advanced chip-to-chip communication, or virtualization, specifically data center virtualization, that have significantly impacted, of course, each of your respective industries and fields. So my question is, could you please discuss the specific challenges you faced in convincing stakeholders and the market in general to embrace these new innovations? Additionally, how did you navigate early uncertainties in product focus, for example, and marketing strategies to, by the end, achieve sustainable growth? And finally, in your view, what role does AI play in the current and future landscape of your industries, particularly concerning large language models and their applications? And thank you.
Okay, maybe I'll start with sort of the key breakthroughs at VMware, and it goes back to the product market fit. It goes back to the story of this duopoly. And at the time, Microsoft was betting everything on the transition from a really, really bad operating system design, which was called Windows 95. And there's a few people in the room who are old enough to remember that, to something which was called Windows NT. And that actually broke backward compatibility for a number of old applications. And so it was putting customers into this very, very tough disposition of having to move to this new version of Windows that was breaking the apps that they were depending on. And this is where we came in. We just told them, well, you can do both, right? You can migrate to the new OS, and then you can have a virtual machine for the old applications. So in a way, we got lucky, right? But we were listening to the market. We had these two giants, each with, 100,000 more employees at the time, each with their product strategies, sometimes that were pushing customers in ways that the customers were trying to resist. And then we came with a solution. We basically said, you can do both. Right? And that was enough to get to profitability and to become credible with enterprise customers. And in a way, the rest is history, right? So this was an inflection point about 25 years ago, in 1999, 2000. And these inflection points, and I think Mark has articulated, they happen every 5 years. There's a new disruption that happens in any particular industry. And the question is, can you take advantage of it?
Yes, I can add to that. So we didn't actually invent a new product because we are in finance, and most of what you do in finance has been invented a long time ago. I think the only one, maybe the only new thing is cryptocurrencies or the blockchain that is really something new associated with the new products. But otherwise, we're just selling the same thing than everyone or all the banks did years ago. So what really changed was the way the consumer is consuming these type of products, you know, the user interface. And this is where the disruptions actually took place. So we didn't actually have to convince the stakeholders. You know, it was an external factor that suddenly makes things completely different. I'll give you another example. You know, who would have thought that Google would be challenged once? You know, they so massively powerful. When you think, you know, the billions of profits they do, the ability they had to just buy out every company they wanted to buy. And suddenly comes a new technology which completely changes the way you interact with your search engine. You know, me, actually, I rather go to Gemini, well, which also Google, by the way, or to ChatGPT to do a search or to answer to the questions I have. Though I don't go to the Google engines any longer. So these disruptions can challenge very powerful companies, and usually this is what is happening. You know, it's less that you completely invent a new product, rather than there has been a shift in consumer habits that suddenly the way you sell your products has changed. And this is the advantage, as we mentioned. You know, these disruptions in a easy flow or in a tranquil flow in a market flow, every 5 years comes a major disruptions, and then you reset everything, and this is where your opportunity lies.
Thank you. I can only second the other speakers. It's how to get to the market. As we all said, you need to talk to lots of people, get the feel where you want to sit. If you have a really good technology, and fortunately for my company we do, you get to like-minded people in large organizations who really push for you. So what I've seen was I either had strong believers who were evangelizing that technology inside their companies, or I had enemies. I mean, there was no in between. So people who were just saying absolutely not, to people who were saying definitely yes. So, you know, it comes, eventually it will come. In terms of how AI is changing things, in my world, it's changing a lot of things. There is a very difficult type of design that you need to do. It's called analog design of analog circuits. It's people call it the black art. It's not an art, but it's, you know, really a lot of experience. But you can train AI to do some of that work for you. And I know NVIDIA, for example, is doing that. They design some of their chips with their own other chips, with the GPUs. Or you can, there is something else called verification, which is very important. You have designed your circuits, you have designed your chip, and before you spend $25 million on a mask set, you want to make sure that this thing works. So there is a whole sort of set of verification tools that you can run on it, and AI helps tremendously there. So in a way, AI helps me, will help me save costs in terms of human cost. No, that's not a very popular thing to say, but it can replace a lot of human work, and it has its good sides and its bad sides, but it is coming. It definitely is coming. Already today, Google, and by the way, you mentioned Gemini. I mean, the T in ChatGPT is coming from Google. The transformer idea is theirs, but they kind of missed, getting there fast. But Google is designing layout using AI models. NVIDIA is doing the same. And others, I'm sure, are also doing this. So this will change tremendously, absolutely tremendously. I know that.
The very last question.
So I have a question.
Okay.
About raising funding. Based on your experience, how can we better translate our solution to the business community and get the investment? For example, for a startup that already has a business plan with realistic estimations and worked on pilot projects to validate the business model, but still suffering to get the investment. So, the business community talk money, they ask about revenue and like Android. Thank you.
Yes, well, you have to pitch your idea, right? You have to pitch your company to venture capitalists. In the beginning, of course, you want to see the return and you want to see how commercially successful your ideas or your product will be. But again, in the beginning, they will pitch you. So you think you go there and you pitch your idea, but actually you're pitching you. So what I would do, if you have a full functioning company, you have some numbers already, so that's a good start. Maybe you have some revenues that you can show. Well, take this as an advantage. You go, you see a VC, and it's like shopping. You shop around and you go and see the right investors into your idea. And if you already are in a more mature stage where you have the first commercial success, then this will only make your life easier in the beginning. But there's no real recipe other than be convincing, be motivated, sell your own quality as an entrepreneur, and then the rest will follow.
So the primary advice I have is really understand deeply what the logic behind multi-stage financing, which basically is as follows. In the life of a company, there are different stages. Each stage is described by a particular milestone, and each stage will be financed by a different class of investors. So there's a class of investors that are very, very happy to help you sort of start an idea, right? At the very beginning, when basically the only thing you have, as Mark said, is yourself, right? You as a person with your drive, your motivation, and your ambition. And those investors, they can get you to the first step, right? These people are very happy to support you with a few $1,000s, but they probably don't have 20 million to put into your business, right? And that's the easy part. And then there's a second stage where you then go to professional investors who want to see more of a business plan, who are also willing to take very high risk, who are willing to lose everything if the company doesn't work out, because that is also their risk model. And as the company grows, then you transition to a different class of investors. And it's very important, and this is something that is business specific, right? For your own business, you need to be able, ideally, to quantify how much you need in order to reach any particular milestone. Now, these milestones, the way to hit the milestone is not by revenues, right? Revenues come relatively late in the game. But the first thing that you need is you need credible, referenceable customers, or credible, referenceable potential customers. So let me give an example. If you want to sell, a widget to a company, and let's say the market has 50 companies who might buy your widget, having a letter from, a vice president at one of those companies, or two vice presidents at two different companies who say, I've evaluated the widget and the potential of the widget, And if the company can deliver the widget, then we're very interested in considering the integration of that widget into X and Y, right? A simple letter, no commitment, no contract, but a simple letter from a referenceable customer that is willing to also give their name and their phone number to further ask questions carries a huge amount of value to investors. Because investors do a due diligence process, and the way you do a due diligence process in the absence of revenues, in the absence of hard numbers, is again by checking the value of the people and by checking with the experts, and in particular the potential customers.
And again, I can only second what my colleague said. But you also need to know your investor. There are just different types. On top of stage investors, they're just people who, you know, have some money, but they really don't know what to put it in. I mean, I've talked to so many of those at the beginning who really thought of deep tech as something like real estate. You just put money in, you know, you attract people, and then you grow. This is not it. So you really need to find the right ones for your particular idea, who are willing to take some risk, who maybe have done it before, and then, you know, everything else that was said you have to do. Thanks.
And maybe one last word. There is a trap, you know, it's called the Death Valley. So it's relatively easy to find the initial funding, but to find the next stage in between, they call it the Death Valley. This is where all the companies fail. And so you have to be ahead of the game. You know, you have to think already about the next stage, which is super difficult because you get the first funding, you are super busy in developing the products, you know, to make it viable, to expand it, to improve it. At the same time, you have to go for the next step already, and then talk to the VCs with a different attitude and with a different mindset. So there is a delicate balance in between to survive the Death Valley.
Okay, unfortunately, again, to keep with the timing, I suggest, oh, not that I suggest, I'm actually even deciding. I decide that we stop here. There will be room for questions later today. There is a session starting at 2:30. I think it's going to be very interesting. The students, some students will actually themselves pitch what their company could look like. And before the pitch by the students, we will have the great pleasure and honor to have Hisham Al-Wadghiri, CEO of Enigma, who will tell us about his company and hopefully who will inspire some of the students to create those unicorns we are talking about. Again, thank you for being here. I would like again to thank the three speakers. Busy agenda, but they came all the way here to share with us their journey from an idea to a company. Thanks so much for being here.